Now, before I talk too much more about creativity and economic growth, let me just give you a couple of facts and figures. I'm not going to give you too many statistics. Let's give you a couple of benchmark statistics on why this creative economic revolution is so important and how big it is. At the turn of the last century, when the clock turned to 1900, more than 50% of people, whether they're in Australia, whether they were in Europe, whether they were in North America, more than 50% of our people worked on farms. By the year 1950, in Australia, in the United States, in Canada, and Europe, we had become industrial societies. Now more than 50% of the workforce worked in manufacturing industry. If you count up all the people who worked in the creative economy, scientists, engineers, innovators, entrepreneurs, artists, cultural people, film directors, dancers, entertainers. Do you know entertainment and culture now are a bigger industry than autos or steel? Healthcare, finance, education, research. You counted up all those people. About 5% of the entire workforce was in this creative sector of the economy. Even as late as 1980, not that long ago, even as late as 1980, only about 10 to 12% of the total working force was in this creative sector of the economy. Now, things were brewing before then, and we talked about that. As early as the 60s, people were beginning to reject the organization man, button-down culture. They were beginning to want to express themselves. But that was channeling in a different way. It was in music, in the rise of popular culture, in the rise in Australia and California in surf culture, in the rise of new ways of people wanting to express, growing their hair, changing their clothing, trying to be themselves. But it's only about 1980 that it starts to take root in the economy. Beginning in 1980, an economic tsunami hits the advanced countries. Between 1980 and today, in the United States, more than 20 million new jobs were created in the creative sector of the economy. Now, in America, 33% of the workforce works in this creative economy. Science, technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, arts, culture, entertainment, design, and the professions. In Australia, it's nearly 40%. Australia has the second highest percentage of its workforce in the creative economy of any country on earth. You are one of the world's leading creative economies already. You have engaged this shift at a further and faster level than the United States. Only Sweden is ahead. If you look at all wages and salaries in the advanced countries and you add them up, you understand that the economy is a manufacturing sector, a service sector, and a creative sector. You divide it into three segments. The creative sector of the economy already accounts for well over 50% of all wages and salaries paid. Across the advanced world, we have 150 million people in this creative class. We will grow tens of millions of new jobs in the creative sector of the economy over the next 10 years. The creative economy today, the creative class today, is to our time what the blue-collar working class of my father was to the industrial age. Now, before I go any further, I just want to clarify one other thing. Lots of people who read my work and who criticize it or debate it or advocate it tend to see it through a particular prism. And the prism they see it through, I understand why it is, but I want to tell you that's not what I'm trying to communicate. The prism they see it through is that what they want to do is attract the creative class. What becomes in the popular mind, for good and bad, is that when people read this work, they say, well, we have to make our town a center for the creative class. We have to make our town attractive to the creative class. And they focus on the software engineers or the bioengineers. Maybe they focus on filmmakers like Peter. But they say, that's what we have to do here, multimedia. And you know, not just the critics who I mentioned before with the yuppies, sophistas, trendoids, and gays, sometimes the advocates, less sophisticated counselors, less sophisticated mayors. I've seen it happen. Well, if we put a latte bar over here, if we put an ultimate frisbee field over here, if we have a surf shop on the corner, a music venue down here, and maybe it's because you have all those things, you know it's not enough. If we do all those things, the creative class will show up because we have all the things they like. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying resonates with what's in your hearts and souls, in your social DNA. What I say in my book, and what was interesting, if you have the Australian edition of the book and you look at the preface, Terry Cutler, who I've never met, says this clearly in the preface. He says, what Florida says in that book is that the key to economic growth is to stoke the creative furnace that lies deep within every single human being. Every single human being is creative. Now, Terry says something else that's funny in that preface, and it's about your country, and I love it. He said when he went into a leading meeting of leading business executives, economic people, public policy makers, civic elites, and he started to tell them about this, and he had an advanced copy of the book, and he talked about the first T, technology. People loved it. We want to make Australia a technology leader. Innovation, that's right. Stronger universities, high-tech companies, business clusters, we're behind you. He talked about talent and human capital. And people said to him, that is phenomenal. That is exactly what we have to do. And he mentioned the third T, tolerance. And he talked about my bohemian factor, the role of places that are open to artists and musicians and dancers and designers. He talked about our gay and lesbian intakes. And he said the room went stone cold silent. And he said he looked those people in the eye. And I've had this feeling myself. I've been in that room in countries all over the world. He said he looked those leaders in the eye and he knew at that moment that they would rather see their economy slow and stagnate than to do what needed to be done to understand open-mindedness and tolerance and diversity to position their country for greatness. It's not just he saw it in that room. I've seen it in every country and every town around the world. That's why we need to lead here. Well, how did I learn about this? How did I learn about the role of creativity? What brought me to understand that every single human being is creative? I had to introspect a lot about that. And the first thing that I thought about was my earlier studies of manufacturing. For 20 years, I studied manufacturing. When the US economy was declining, when we were losing manufacturing, when we were hollowing out, I went, and at that time in the 1990s, the Japanese companies were opening up new factories in the United States. And I was living in the Midwest, and I saw these factories in Ohio and in Michigan and in other states opening, a Honda factory, a Toyota factory, a Nissan factory, a Sony factory. I said to myself, I have to investigate what's going on. So I went to visit them all. And I went and I visited many, many, many factories in Japan and in Germany and all across Europe. And I studied these new, high-tech, high-performance factories. And when I went to visit Toyota, the people at Toyota told me something very interesting that I couldn't comprehend. They said to me, Professor Florida, with all due respect, we're going to beat you in the economic race. They said, America's a great country and you've had great manufacturing. We thank you for the technology you transferred here. But they said, we're going to win and you're going to lose. The reason is in your thinking. You think the key to a great company is the great, strong CEO, the great engineers, all the top MBAs with their top degrees making the strategies. But you treat the worker like a lowly person. The people at Toyota told me the key to our economic strategy is that we see the source of economic prosperity in each and every one of those factory workers. It's their ability to innovate, to contribute, to improve our products and processes, to work as teams to come up with new ideas. We're going to harness the energy of every single one of those minds. And 25 years later, they're the largest and most important manufacturing company on earth. And then I thought about it a little more. And I realized I didn't learn it by my studies of Toyota. I actually learned it from my father. My father, as I told you, his name was Louis Florida. He was born in 1921 in Newark, New Jersey. My dad became a teenager in the midst of the Great Depression. Perhaps your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents did the same. My dad's family was poor. They lived in a very small apartment, 7 brothers and sisters and a mom and dad. My dad's father worked in a factory. Well, the family had to figure out a way to put food on the table. So my dad in the 7th grade in McKinley Junior High School, middle school, in Newark, New Jersey, put his books down on his desk on the day he turned 13. He walked down to the employment office and he got a job working in a factory making eyeglasses.